All right, so we're diving deep today, like really deep. We're heading straight into the heart of Brazil to explore this tangled web of economic development and its impact on the environment.
Yeah, it's a fascinating but complex story. You've got reports, data, firsthand accounts, all sorts of stuff.
From the busy streets of Rio de Janeiro all the way to the vast, expansive Amazon rainforest. So,
It's a big journey, but hopefully we can paint a pretty vivid picture for everyone listening.
definitely. And I think one of the things that really jumped out to me as we were kind of getting ready for this deep dive was this idea that, like, the types of goods that countries produce can have a direct impact on their environmental footprint.
Absolutely. When you look at, let's say, low-income countries, their economies often really depend on extracting and exporting raw materials, right? Things
Right.
like timber or iron or what we call primary goods.
Okay. Yeah.
But as those nations develop and kind of move into that category of what we call newly emerging economies, they start to shift, they shift towards manufacturing. Think about cars, electronics, clothing, those sorts of things, all secondary goods.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And then, of course, you have those high-income countries that consume a massive amount of energy just to keep everything running right.
Right.
So you see this progression, extracting raw materials, manufacturing goods, and then a society that's heavily reliant on consuming energy. Each step has its own kind of unique environmental burden. The impact shifts too. You go from maybe localized resource depletion to these bigger global concerns like carbon emissions.
Right. Okay.
It's definitely something to keep in mind as we explore further.
Yeah, it's interesting how the impact kind of shifts and changes. But speaking of impact, we've got Rio de Janeiro, right?
Yeah.
It's this prime example of a city that's grappling with all the environmental consequences of rapid growth.
Mm.
And one statistic that really kind of stopped me in my tracks was that 5,000 deaths per year in Rio are attributed to car pollution.
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
sobering figure.
It's heavy.
It really underscores the kind of pressure that Rio's infrastructure is under. And it's not just about pollution, right? We have to think about the strain on things like water resources, for example, or the whole challenge of waste management. Both of those things have huge environmental implications.
Yeah, because I was reading that a shocking amount of Rio's water is just, like, lost.
37%. Think about that.
Yeah.
Over a third of their water supply just vanishes into the ground through leaks and things like that.
Wow.
They've been investing in new pipes, laying hundreds of kilometers, but it's a constant race against time to fix this aging system.
Yeah, and it makes you realize how easily we take that kind of, like, basic infrastructure for granted in a lot of places. And then when it comes to waste, I can only imagine the scale of the issue in a city like Rio.
It's substantial, that's for sure. Every single day, 50 tons of industrial waste and 200 tons of raw sewage end up flowing into Rio Bay. That contamination has this devastating impact on marine life, not to mention the risks it poses to public health. It really is a sobering reminder that these environmental challenges are often intertwined with social and economic issues.
Yeah, it's a complex web for sure. Okay, well, speaking of complex, maybe we can shift gears a little bit to another major issue that we've been digging into. Iron ore extraction in Brazil,
Yeah, that's a big one.
especially in the Amazon.
Right. We were talking about primary goods earlier.
Right.
Well, iron ore is a perfect example. Brazil is actually the world's second largest producer. But this industry, man, it has a heavy, heavy footprint.
Yeah.
To get to that iron ore, you have to clear vast areas of the Amazon. We're talking about contributing to the loss of 750,000 square kilometers of rainforest every single year.
That's an area larger than Texas.
Just gone.
Wow. It's difficult to even comprehend that scale of deforestation. But it's not just about the loss of the trees themselves, is it? I mean, what happens to all the wildlife in those areas?
That's one of the biggest tragedies, right? This kind of deforestation, it fragments habitats, it pushes countless species closer and closer to the brink of extinction. And then you have the extraction process itself, which generates all these toxic waste products.
Yeah.
Arsenic, lead.
Right.
It's nasty stuff. They often store it in these massive mud lakes held back by dams.
Hold on, Bud Lakes? That sounds incredibly precarious.
It is. And unfortunately, we've seen the consequences. Back in 2015, one of these dams in Brazil collapsed, released this torrent of 62 million cubic meters of toxic waste.
Oh, wow.
It wiped out all the fish in the Doce River, left hundreds of thousands of people without access to clean drinking water.
It's almost hard to believe.
It's a devastating reminder of the risks we're talking about.
Yeah, and this isn't an isolated incident, right?
Sadly, no. A similar dam collapse happened in 2019.
Right.
Just goes to show that these risks are real and they can have this profound impact on both human communities and the natural environment.
Right. And these events, they kind of tie into the broader problem of deforestation in the Amazon, don't they? I mean, we're losing 750,000 square kilometers of rainforest every year.
Hmm.
That's a staggering amount of carbon that's no longer being absorbed, which of course contributes to the whole, global climate crisis.
Exactly. It's this double whammy, right? Not only are we losing these incredibly biodiverse ecosystems, but we're also compromising the planet's ability to regulate its own climate.
Right.
And it's not just iron ore driving this deforestation either. We got to look at the expansion of cattle ranching, for instance, which accounts for like 65 to 70% of deforested land in the Amazon. And then there's the booming soybean industry.
It's almost like a domino effect. One industry kind of pushes further into the rainforest, creating space for another. And then you have things like the Trans-Amazonian Highway, right? This 5 to 300-kilometer road cutting through the heart of the Amazon. It's meant to open up the region for development. But what about the impact on the rainforest's, delicate ecosystems?
Well, whenever you have road construction like that, it fragments habitats, it disrupts wildlife migration patterns, and frankly makes the forest more accessible for illegal logging and mining. It's a classic example of how these infrastructure projects, while intended to stimulate economic growth, can have these unintended and often pretty detrimental consequences for the environment.
Right. Well, it feels like we've uncovered a lot of challenges here, which is important. But are there any glimmers of hope? I mean, are there any solutions being explored to address these issues in a meaningful way?
Oh, absolutely. There are some really promising things happening. There are these growing movements advocating for sustainable forestry practices, promoting responsible land management. There's a big push for stricter environmental regulations, and there's a lot of excitement around shifting towards renewable energy sources and investing in cleaner, more efficient technologies.
So it sounds like it's a multi-pronged approach, kind of trying to tackle the issue from all angles.
Exactly. And it's not just about governments and large corporations, right? Individual choices matter too. By supporting companies committed to sustainability, advocating for stronger environmental policies, even just being more mindful of our own consumption habits, we can all contribute to creating a more balanced relationship between economic growth and environmental protection.
It's a powerful reminder that we're all part of this interconnected web. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the environmental impacts of economic development in Brazil, one question that I keep coming back to is this. How can we as individuals become more conscious consumers? How can we understand the impact our choices have on places as far away as the Amazon? That's something to think about.
Definitely.
All right, well, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.